Hello and welcome to today's grand incident, or at least a premiere to it. Today I wanted to talk about a game that's currently in early access, but even with that being the case, there's still a full game experience to be had. I got no fluff here, so let's get to the point. Today's game is known as Touhou-themed Branch of Legend. The game's early access was released on Steam on August 18, 2022, by the group Alioth Studio, and is a card game roguelike starring 5 playable characters. Now, like I've said twice now, this game is still in early access, so there's a chance that some things I say here won't apply to the final version. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's begin. The story here is that Kaguya has decided to host another moon exposition after a disappointing result of the first one. Many people come by to take a gander, and at some point, an exhibit is stolen from the showcase. Kaguya, thinking it's simply part of the show, announces that whoever finds the missing item will be allowed to trade it for one of her 5 treasures. Everyone storms out, and Reimu is confronted by Eden. Now how the game works. Ever heard of Slay the Spire? If so, most of what I'm going to say will sound familiar. However, Lost Branch of Legend is the first time I've ever played this genre, and I'll be explaining how it works as if it's your first time too. Let's back up a bit to start. There's currently 3 characters to play with: Reimu, Marisa, and Sakuya, and each character has 2 starting loadouts, equipped with a spell card, exhibit, and deck. The decks are all essentially the same start, but have a card that pairs well with the playstyle. Let me give you an example. Marisa has a loadout that spell card is simply damage. The exhibit adds 1 charge whenever red mana is used, more on mana in a bit, and the extra card activates twice at the cost of 2 charge. If the player accumulates 8 charge, they activate a buff that makes all attacks deal double damage. So in short, the gameplay of this loadout is all about firepower, an extremely Marisa style of play. Let's move on to the mana now. There are 7 different types of mana in the game, and each character starts with 4. The 5th is granted by the starting exhibit. Cards cost mana. You can see the cost on the upper right of the card. Neutral mana cost means that any mana color can fill it, and a rainbow mana counts as every mana at the same time. When playing a card, it will automatically choose the mana it uses, but you can still choose manually. To use Marisa as an example again, the loadout I mentioned earlier starts with 2 fire and 2 dark mana, and her exhibit adds 1 fire mana. To use her basic attack, Hot Star Impact, you need to spend 2 mana total, and one of them has to be fire mana. So now that you've picked a character, and understand mana, let's talk about the gameplay. First, the absolute basics. Each turn you draw a default of 5 cards. You can play cards as long as you have the mana. Attack cards do damage, defense cards reduce damage taken. All cards in your hand are discarded at the end of the turn, and you don't keep unspent mana. Once your deck has been exhausted, the discard pile is shuffled and refills the deck. On the enemy side, they have different actions they can do, but you can always see what they're going to do above their head, so you can plan accordingly. Clearing a battle gives money and the option to choose one of 3 random cards to add to your deck. Now this is the most basic of the basics. There's plenty of card types and effects that add way more depth to the game, but you gotta take it one step at a time. Now let's talk a little bit about the map. You choose from multiple paths that all lead to the same checkpoint, so to speak. There's Enemy, Elite, Event, Shop, and Gap. Enemy is what I described in the basics. Elites are all named Touhou characters and are much stronger than regular enemies. They give more money, better cards, and a free exhibit upon defeat. Events are random events that vary in effect. They can end up being game-changing for you, or just a waste of time. Shops are shops. You can buy cards, exhibits, and card removal services, provided you have the cash. Gaps are rest stops. You can use them to heal a bit, or upgrade a card. You can see the whole map right out the gate, so you can chart out whatever course suits your needs. Each map has a different 5th stop, but I only want to mention the ones that appear on every map. The last 2 being the Bunny Box and the Boss. Bunny Box is a free exhibit, and the Boss is the Boss. Boss rewards are like the Elites, but more money and better cards. The exhibit, however, is one that adds more mana to use with an additional effect, much like your starting exhibit. You can choose to add more of your starting color, or take on a new color altogether. The only cards that can appear in your run are the ones that cost what you have, so new colors add more cards. But why exactly would you want to do that? Each character has unique cards that appear for them, along with the common pool. All characters actually have unique cards and mana colors they can't start with, and these cards are often pretty good to warrant the mana management. Even though they're labeled unique, you can actually get them with any character, provided you obtain the exhibit that allows it. That was a lot, so let me try and summarize. You choose your character and chart a course throughout each area, getting better cards and additional exhibits to build yourself up. The basics of combat are attacking and defending. You don't keep unspent mana or unplayed cards at the end of the turn. and the discard pile shuffles into the deck when you run out. Cards that require mana you don't have won't show up, and characters have unique cards in every color, but obtaining certain exhibits in a run lets others use them. Now that I've gotten all that out of the way, allow me to use the rest of the time talking about why exactly I've developed a bit of an addiction to this game. So firstly, the presentation. The art, fantastic. The music, great. And the UI, clean. All the cards in the game have artwork. Some even have multiple versions you can choose to use. The art ranges from gorgeous to goofy. Some make me go wow, and others make me laugh at their silly nature. The cards themselves are colored to match the mana they require, but cards that require 2 different kinds of mana mix the colors and make a nice holographic shine to them. It's a nice touch. Outside the cards, the art for the characters and events is just as strong. It almost makes me want to try every option just to see if there's any variation. The whole aesthetic of Yukari's Gap is beautiful, and I hope that Takane's shop gets similar treatment in the future, as right now it's set up similarly to an enemy encounter. The music has nice variation, a good mix of calm tracks and energetic ones, but nothing too overbearing that you can't concentrate on taking your turn. The UI might take a bit of getting used to, but it provides all the information you'll need at any given time at any moment. It helps immensely for planning your next move. Now the gameplay parts. Simply put, card synergy is fun. Every character type has a recommended style to it, but there's nothing in the game preventing you from building what you want. There's plenty of different styles to try, and they're all pretty fun to use. For an example, one of Marisa's loadouts uses potions, a card that does damage when drawn. Marisa has a bunch of cards that add more potions, makes them stronger, grants them additional effects, etc. So by the end of the game, you can create a full-on factory line of potions being thrown at your opponent. Like I said though, you don't have to follow the intended method, as there's plenty of cards to work with that often go well with multiple strategies. In a run I did for big damage Marisa, I ended up turning it into a poison stall deck, the exact opposite of how Marisa would play. Speaking of that, it's honestly amazing how appropriate the intended loadouts are for each character. Reimu plays with barriers and borders, Marisa with heavy firepower or magic potions, and Sakuya with throwing knives and time manipulation. It's not just the character accuracy either. The way they feel as a playstyle is just as enjoyable as it is fitting. This makes me pretty excited to see what the devs cook up for the remaining characters, Chirno and Koishi, when they're done. It's not just the playable characters either. All the elites and bosses, as well as the events, are super in character. It's pretty clear that the devs of this game are huge Touhou fans, as the attention to detail is top notch on all fronts here. There's lots of abilities, skills, buffs, debuffs, etc. It can be a lot to unpack. Thankfully, many of these have rather simple explanations to them. On my first run, I remember thinking, wow, that's a lot, and I am not reading all this. But after a while in the same run, I got so engaged with the game that I stopped looking for the TLDR and read things multiple times to fully understand how they work. I know that sounds a bit stupid, but my point here is that I was enjoying the game so much that the reading stopped feeling like a chore. It also helped that by that time, I understood the basics so I could better grasp what it was I was reading. This game has very much sparked an interest in Slay the Spire for me, so I might check it out someday. But probably not before I get as much as I possibly can out of this one, as this is a phenomenal Touhou fan game with a ton of replay value to it. And you know what the craziest part is? It's still early access. There is a full-length game currently available here, already well over 300 cards and a ton of different exhibits to use, and a healthy amount of enemies and events. New characters means a bunch of new unique cards, some new exhibits, and more than likely new enemies and events. That there's this much already to enjoy is impressive, but that there's more to come for it is especially exciting. And I firmly believe that this game could be not only an extremely top-notch Touhou fan game, but one of the best games in its genre when it finally reaches its full release. Regarding the Circle, Alias Studio, they are, quite obviously, still active. While the group itself is new, the current members all have prior experience working on games. And given the quality of Lost Branch of Legend, that's not terribly surprising to hear. Specifically for Touhou games, one of the members had previously worked on The Disappearance of Gensokyo, and all the current members had assisted with another relatively new Touhou fan game known as Dreamland of Infinity. I'm looking forward to whatever the group works on in the future, Touhou or otherwise, as this game has done a great job displaying their abilities as creators. So before we start talking about what's next, let's make sure Lost Branch of Legend reaches its full release. With all that said, time for the rating. Touhou Lost Branch of Legend is pretty much a ranked Chirno of a game. Let me explain why. Now this game can definitely take some time to learn, but that's more on the genre, not Touhou. Like I mentioned earlier, the characters and events are all pretty accurate, and the way they work as playables and enemies matches them well, but this won't give you an advantage or anything like that. Everything is in the writing, and the game is good at explaining without expecting any prior knowledge of Touhou. Now, as a fan of Touhou myself, seeing the love of the series the devs pour into the game is a treat. But the fact is, this game is perfectly playable without knowing much of anything of the series. And this is honestly something I think is a strong point of any Touhou fan game, that it can stand on its own even for someone who doesn't know or even care about Touhou itself. While I said knowing Touhou won't do much in the way of gaining an advantage, if you've ever played Slay the Spire before, then you'll more than likely be able to pick up on the differences quickly, and start fully enjoying what this game has to offer much earlier. Would you agree or disagree? Let me know what you think. Lost Branch of Legend was my introduction to this genre, and as a first experience, it has definitely made me interested in the genre as a whole. I didn't really have any negatives to say, as I've yet to run into any real issues, and also I haven't really touched higher difficulties, or even used a fraction of the available cards. The devs have been adjusting the game balance, so cards and events have been changed, though I couldn't tell you what exactly has been altered. Point here is, the devs are responding to criticism and balancing the game, and I've yet to have any problem with it. So I'll take that as a sign it's going well, or that there's very little they've needed to adjust on that front at all. It's clear to me how much the devs care about this game, and I'm glad I gave it a real chance, given that I was never particularly interested in card roguelikes prior. If you're a fan of either the genre, Touhou, or both, then this game is an easy recommendation, as it's currently completely playable, though if you want to wait for its full release, I fully understand. Regardless of whether you choose to jump in now or wait it out, I hope you come to enjoy this game and everything it has to offer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.